Hi guys, welcome back to Giant Talk, the world's first OKR podcast in partnership with Koan, the dedicated OKR platform. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Folu Okonade. Apologies if I've got that wrong, but I try my best, of Hello Tractor. Folu leads the OKR process at Hello Tractor, and today he'll be discussing how OKRs have been implemented at their small business, and also what challenges they still face when it comes to OKRs. So welcome, Folu. Welcome to Giant Talk. I'm delighted to have you with us today. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself, please? Yourself, Hello Tractor, and your current role within the organisation.
Sure. Thanks, Jenny. Happy to be on. And you did get my name right, so thanks. So yes, my name is Folu Okonade. I'm the COO at Hello Tractor. I've been in this role for about 2 years now. Hello Tractor, for those who are unfamiliar, we are a platform that connects tractor owners with smallholder farmers that are in need of tractor services. So we operate in out of 13 countries in Africa and 3 in Asia. We have our technology solution present there. Our offices are based in both Nigeria and Kenya, and I'm currently based in Kenya.
I love that when we spoke in our recording chat as well, that you said it's like the Uber for tractors. And I just love that way of thinking about it. It's great.
It's in one sense, it is a platform that connects on-demand services for farmers. So we get compared often to as the Uber of tractors.
Yeah, it's cool. And I love the brand name as well. I think Hello Tractor is great. So OKRs were introduced at Hello Tractor in 2018, but what were the main reasons behind introducing them?
Yeah, so one of the main reasons was really to just start aligning the team on the key goals and key direction of the organization. I think corporate communication started to be part of the some key objectives of the company. We had actually just opened up our Kenya office in 2018, so now we had a distributed team. So we wanted to make sure that the management couldn't be at both places or all places all the time. So it was it was really critical to make sure that staff still felt engaged. They knew that what they were working on was aligned with the core objectives of the company, and really for them to understand kind of how they were performing against the goals that were set by them and as well as by management. So it was really to align a distributed team along with a core set of company goals and objectives.
Great. And I know when we spoke, you mentioned that kind of when they were first introduced, people maybe felt like they were almost a performance review and maybe a stick to beat people with in some ways. So how did you go about changing the OKR process, and kind of what steps did you take to make it better?
Yeah, no, it's part of the OKR journey, right? So, the way we started it, because we're a small agile team, we didn't want to have too many forums and too many meetings where we were talking about performance KPIs and OKRs. So we thought OKRs to be kind of the best tool for really aligning people's goals and objectives on a quarterly basis. But I think that at least from the feedback that I received when I first joined, the OKR started feeling more as a kind of a one-directional stick, as you would in kind of a performance review, right? That at that point we'd also tied in with kind of bonuses and compensation, and so it made people kind of tense when they were having these OKR meetings, right? And I witnessed that as well when I first joined. And one of the things that I said about changing was to make it more of a conversation. I'd love to do it more frequently, and unfortunately, because of just lack of capacity, we still do it on a quarterly basis. But we've put in some other things that allows folks to review their OKRs more regularly. But yeah, so I wanted to really make it more of a conversation. Wanted to make it two-sided, but even really, driven by the employee. And so now we talk about OKRs, and my goal is to remain largely silent, and hear what their what their goals are for the quarter. Obviously, prior to that, we make sure that we set the organization and leadership objectives, and so they already know that ahead of time, and so they're able to kind of shape their goals and expectations there as well. So it's been a really good transition to watch employees kind of take ownership of what their goals for the quarter goals are, right? And see that. And I think the other thing that has really helped is to provide that transparency and that linkage between what the organization is doing and what are our key objectives and strategies, and individually from a day-to-day perspective, what the employee is working on. So that transparency and the alignment to the company's strategy and goals has really been key for us.
Great. And I know one thing you mentioned when we had our chat was about the kind of change management language within the company, and almost like the language needed to change around OKRs. So maybe teams were calling OKRs KPIs, and there was a bit of confusion there. So I think we mentioned there's a lot of clarity around that, and that's helping to move the process forward for you as well.
No, absolutely. And change management, I come from, 13 years at a consulting firm, and we did a lot of change management. So that's something that's always evolving. But language is a key component to that. So really getting people away from calling it KPIs or calling the performance review, and really seen as a conversation. We've even, like I alluded to earlier, we've moved to the point where the employee is really leading the conversation, right? They're sharing their screens. They're showing me what they've done. Less about, did you do this? Why didn't you do it? And how do you get punished for not doing it?
Yeah, less about a task list and like what's the projects that can help us move the needle on these objectives. Yeah, exactly. Great. I know in our chat you mentioned that there was a heavy performance system in place. Kind of what do you mean by this, and how did OKRs change that heavy performance system?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough kind of balancing act, right? Because you do want to have some level of performance review and performance systems in place.
Definitely.
But again, like I said, you don't want to kind of overload a small, lean team that's already working their asses off. A performance system as well as an OKR system, right? So, it was heavy in the sense of, there were goals that we were calling OKRs, but they were really kind of top-down driven goals for each of the teams and each of the employees. And there were clearly, metrics tied to those goals, and either a reward or some consequences tied to not meeting those goals. So it was kind of your typical top-heavy performance system. I think the way that we've changed those now is we really try to treat OKRs as OKRs. There's still obviously, it's not 9 days, so there's still some. There's still going to be some tie-in with the performance. Generally, most of what we work on is as a small startup. Ours is strategic. Most people are working on those strategic goals. And so organically, your performance overall is tied to how you do on the OKRs. And so we can't really divorce that too much. But like I said earlier, we really try not to look at it as a stick. We have other kind of performance type meetings that we do with the management team, but the OKR is really set apart for the employee to reflect on the last quarter, and what was accomplished then, to look at the next quarter vis-a-vis the overall company objectives, and how they can tie into that, and how they can line that, and how they can move that needle forward.
Yeah, I think that's something that we definitely advocate at Derby Giants, is the fact that the OKRs have got to be part of the performance discussion. But if someone's not met a stretch goal, that shouldn't necessarily be because they've not worked hard. So it's just got to be part of the discussion rather than actually meeting the target, whether they get a bonus, for example, or whether they've done well. So I completely kind of agree with you on that front. So I want to just loop back to something you've mentioned a couple of times now, that you're running your OKRs on a quarterly review. And I know you said this partly because of duplication on check-ins. When we chatted, you mentioned that your tech teams already run daily stand-ups. And so the OKR check-in felt like a duplication. So how do you plan to kind of change that? Have you got any plans in the process to kind of overcome this in the future?
Yeah, so one of the really awesome tools that we use as part of the kind of OKR process is the reflections. And we've tried to do the weekly reflections. We're going through a bit of a change with that at the moment. But the adoption out of the gate was a little bit high or acceptable. But then it started declining. One of the reasons that it was declining was because of this overlap with some of the other existing processes that we had, right? So, trying to keep it as lean as possible and not overload people with repetitive activities, right? So we have daily stand-ups, for example, within the tech team, where they write about what they're working on and how that's going, if there's any blockers. Similar questions as what we ask in the weekly reflections as well. And so one of the things that we just try to do is see where we can, merge some of those activities, right? We'll talk about Cone a little bit later, but the Cone team has been really receptive to feedback and, kind of learning how our processes are, and trying to help fit some of the features that they were developing into what works for a lot of teams. I think luckily our feedback is not much different from other companies, and so I'd like to think that they were doing it because of me, but I'm sure other teams had similar feedback. So for example, we've been able to align kind of our retrospectives, which we do at the end of each sprint every 2 weeks, with the reflections on the Cone tool that we use. And so instead of having employees kind of fill both of the forms, we can align the questions there so that at the output is something that's rich enough for us to take action on, but that's also gives us the detail that or gives the employee the details they need to reflect on what's been done and where to go from there.
Koan is a purpose-built solution for managing your OKRs. Helps your team achieve their objectives and key results, helps them get aligned, and it helps them stay engaged. Shared spreadsheets simply don't scale when you're using OKRs properly, and you're not going to have a maximum impact with them. But with Koan, you can scale your OKRs right across your entire company, keeping your team super motivated and moving everybody in the right direction. Roger, what's one of your favourite features about Koan?
So the thing that I really love about Koan, and have done ever since I first saw it, was how it really puts the conversation around OKRs at the heart of the system, and it really helps stimulate that, which obviously brings really good collaboration. They've got this reflections feature which helps individuals really prepare for the team conversation, which is going to come up, where the collaboration is going to take place. So that would definitely be the thing for me, which is the killer feature of the system.
Yeah, and I think that kind of cadence of reflection is really important and something that we almost advocate people getting involved with before they even necessarily set OKRs. So if they're having a reflection cadence every week and kind of testing and learning and adapting from that reflection, then that kind of gets them into the way of thinking about OKRs as well before they maybe set their own. So I think that's really... Sorry?
Yeah. Sorry, I was going to say, it's kind of like writing in your diary. I've always before I've tried to pick it up so many times, but I've really been before at doing, keeping up with the diary. But for those who are, used to it, it really is that kind of digital diary of, how you're progressing. What I've found is that for people that do kind of keep it, or at least try to keep up with the reflections, it really helps the quarterly meetings go much more smoothly, because you can just pull that up and kind of see how you've done against each of the goals, week over week. It doesn't take you as much time to kind of look back and think, okay, what happened 3 months ago and how did I feel about that? So you're able to kind of track that more systematically.
And I guess with being kind of a startup business like yourselves, where everyone's kind of pitching in and helping, I guess to remember kind of what went on last week might be quite difficult. So a couple of weeks down the line might be more difficult for people. So like you say, I think it's a really good habit for people to get into. You mentioned Koan. I know you use the Koan system to manage the OKR process for Hello Tractor. So how do you, something we get asked regularly is, do I need a system? Can I use spreadsheets? So I just wanted to ask you really how kind of using a specific OKR system, in your case, Koan, has helped with the OKR implementation.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we started with spreadsheet. My go-to is always, I'm an Excel guy, so my go-to is always a spreadsheet. And like I said, it helps in one sense of the word, right? It helped to track the objectives and key results. I think where it fell short was one in the transparency side, and also the accessibility of employees to really be able to interact with the tools. It was very static. And so we set about kind of looking for a tool that would bring about the right level of transparency, would engender the adoption of or the culture of really thinking through your objectives, not just on a quarterly basis, but even more regularly with reflections. And so we looked at different tools that were out there, and Cone actually just made the most sense. I think like us, they're a startup as well, so they were really flexible. They inspired me because I see an update almost weekly, if not more often. And so I'm thinking for our product, we should also be updates on a weekly basis, right? So, but super flexible and accessible team, which was really really nice. And the product was light, right? So it didn't feel heavy. It didn't feel like the adoption would be too great, right? And that's something that I'm constantly looking at, is that we introduce new tools all the time. We want to make sure that it's something that actually fits into what people generally are doing, or that where the adoption is not going to be too much of a heavy lift. And so what it was able to provide is, it actually brought structure, not just to the employees, but to the management team, because we had to sit down at the beginning of each quarter, at the end of the previous quarter, to do our own reflections before we even start opening it up to the team, and likewise also do it on a yearly basis as well, to say, okay, what are our company goals and objectives? What are some of the key results that we're going to be looking out for? And then you can start kind of filtering that down into teams, and how they should align to those kind of overarching goals. So that linkage was super important. I love the tree view within Cone. I'm sure other tools have it as well, but it's so critical to kind of see, there's no kind of standalone objectives out there. Nothing is floating in space. It's all tied to the overall company objectives, which is tied to the success of the company overall.
Great. Yeah, and like we hear that a lot about, obviously we've got a lot of kind of clients that are working with Koan and other systems as well, and we can really see the benefit of having a dedicated system. So like you say, the transparency, it gives you the linkage, kind of the reminders that all the systems give you for your reflections and things like that are really important. So what's next for OKRs at Hello Tractor?
Well, I've talked several times about adoption, right?
Yeah.
I think we're still not there yet when it comes to, obviously the quarterly meetings are happening because I make them happen. But in terms of really utilizing the full feature set of Cone, right? Getting people to put in their reflections, making sure that within the teams, when we do retrospectives, if we're not doing Cone, we're at least linking the systems, whether from a whether from a technology perspective, or just making sure that the objectives that are in Cone are aligned to kind of the retrospectives that we're running, right? So really just embedding the OKR process into other processes as a company. I think that's going to be critical. So, we're going to be looking at increasing and improving our adoption rates over the next 2 quarters. The other thing is, even with our kind of small team, I still run most of the quarterly OKR meetings. And so really looking to build in a structure where there's kind of a team accountability for each of the team objectives, so that we can kind of decentralize the OKR sessions, right? Like I said, the reflections are happening, the team stand-ups are happening, the retrospectives are happening, but I'd love the kind of OKR sessions to be happening within the teams, and the teams that really having taking ownership of that as well. So looking to build that into the org structure.
Great. Sounds positive next steps for Hello Tractor anyway in the process. So we've probably got a lot of listeners listening to this episode that they're in a similar position to you. They may be in a small business or a startup. They may have just started with their OKR journey, or they may be thinking about implementing OKRs. So did you have any words of advice for some other small businesses who are looking to introduce them?
Just do it. If I can steal that term. So one of the things that really helped me, at least, and the management team is we all read Measure What Matters by John Doerr, which is such a good baseline for understanding OKRs. Like I said, I come from the consulting world where performance management and performance systems was such a big thing. I mean, it just kind of consumed your life for a bit of time there. Quite an expensive undertaking. So really, divorcing my mind from that system into an OKR system, needed a lot of work. and the book really helped structure, put that into a neat structure. So lots of lessons in that. And then there's other books out there as well, but that's the one that as a management team we read to really kind of understand how we should be rolling out OKRs. So definitely I recommend doing some research, reading that book or other books, and then just starting with the sessions. Obviously, the tool is great, but depending on budget or where you are as a company, again, it's Excel is an okay place to start as well. It doesn't fit all the needs, but at least it's a starting point. So start somewhere, and take a listen to the books, the blogs. There's endless amounts of material out there. Definitely take advantage of them.
Yeah, and I think, like you said there, I think it's important to do your reading around it. So go out, look at all the blogs that are available, the podcasts, the download guides, all those kind of things, and gather as much information together as possible. I also like what you said about just do it. You're probably not going to get OKRs right first time. You might even not get them right third, fourth, fifth time. It's all about that kind of trying it, learning from it, and then adapting to make it better as you go through the process. So completely agree, kind of just do it. And we won't we won't try and trademark that phrase by any means. That's great, Folu. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you've enjoyed the chat. I think it's been really useful to kind of, for our listeners that may be in a similar situation to you and looking to roll OKRs out into a small business. So thank you for sharing your wisdom with me today.
Thanks for having me, Jenny.
That's all right. As always, if you've got any feedback on the episode or you'd like to leave us a review, pop onto your favoured podcast platform and leave us a review on there. That'd be great. And we look forward to seeing you next time for another episode of Giant Talk.